Since end of last century, I conducted more than 200 independent studies on Mexican aerophones and resonators of wind. My electronic papers with the results are available on internet at Tlatelolco. I began with the curiosity and love of a child, and over time, I progressed into detailed formal investigations using and developing a method of sonorous archaeoscience. These studies have never been included in any institutional research or educational programs. I had to learn various techniques such as acoustics, signal analysis, modeling in various materials. Over 1,000 experimental models have been built and analyzed. The used method and techniques could be applied to every important recovered ancient resonator and its sounds, as death, life or wind resonator of this presentation. Death, life or wind resonators were exclusively used in several zones of ancient Mexico. They belong to a singular family of rare wind resonators that can reproduce the noisy sounds of imitate animal calls, winds, and storms, but they are not well known. Their original information was lost. Several ancient wind resonators of this sonorous family were recovered. Since last century, some of them were analyzed by several authors. They published very few information of their shape, morphology, decoration and several designations, mainly, but their sounds are not known. The only known noisy sounds of this type were found in 2 audio tracks of the disc pre-Columbian instrument of Mexico sold by Folkways Records that were recorded from 2 storm whistles of the Smithsonian Museum, but I was not allowed to reproduce them in my public presentations. In 1962, the first drawings of aerophones of spring were published by engineer José Luis Franco. One Aztec or Mexica was decorated with a skull. Other has the face of an owl, also associated with the death. Franco published the first drawing of the internal sonorous mechanism. The spring is the globular internal chamber, which functions as a Helmholtz resonator. Franco analyzed the aerophones of spring for 10 years, but only 2 papers of them were published. In 1988, musician Guillermo Contreras published 4 death whistles from Maya and Aztec or Mexica cultures and a drawing of the internal structure of one of them. In 1999, archaeologist Salvador Guillermo Arroyo published photos and drawings of 2 death whistles that were found in the hands of a skeleton recovered in a burial in front of the EHECATL temple, at the archaeological site of Tlatelolco, Mexico City. Those type of whistles disappeared when the invaders from Spain came, as all the rest of ancient objects, monuments and writings that they could see, 5 centuries ago. I was not allowed to analyze the whistles and their sounds were not published. The whistles from Tlatelolco are the first known associated with death that have an archaeological context, but it is very complex and rich. 41 burials with skeletons were found in that ceremonial space, as it is shown in the photo of the exploration, in 1964. They say that the sacrificed personage was to honor EHECATL. All sacrificed people were to ask for rain and to eliminate a wide famine and drought. 1964. The photo shows a burial with a skeleton, by Salvador Guillermo. 1988. The exact location of the burial with the 2 wind resonators is shown with the red arrow. The burial was located in front of the EHECATL temple, at his east. The resonators were associated with the death by the skeleton and with the wind by the temple of EHECATL and their noisy sounds of wind, but several types of wind exist in the nature and in the ancient mythology. Those 2 Mexican concepts are shown in the Borgia Codex with MICTLANTECUHTLI, death, and EHECATL, wind. They are important and very complex in the Mexican mythology and ideology. They represent one of the main dialectic concepts of all the opposite things, phenomenon and ideas as death and life, day and night and so on. For them, they were 2 concepts, but one, at the same time. Death is also the life and one follows the other. Death is a travel to other life. The resonators of wind show the same concepts, in their decoration and sounds. Also, In 2002, I knew a photo of the first known wind resonator of the collection of musical composer Jorge Dager, which is shown in a drawing. Other very similar from Huixtla, a state of Mexico, belongs to the collection of Gregorio Cortés Vergara and his brother Mario. Those wind resonators were not analyzed or commented in a known paper and their sounds were not published. The oldest resonator of windy noise is the extraordinary Olmec sonorous ilmenite that was used 3 millenniums ago. Nearly 140,000 similar objects were found in the archaeological site of San Lorenzo, Veracruz State. A virtual doctoral thesis was published, but it is forbidden, because I couldn't find professors or teachers to revise it in any educative institution. But some study results of that resonator were presented in the best academic forums of the world, as those of acoustic and music archaeology. Many ancient similar buccal resonators made of rocks, bones and ceramic, were recovered in zones of several states as Oaxaca, Jalisco, Veracruz, Guerrero, Querétaro and Estado de Mexico. Their morphology is the hearth chamber of all ancient Mexican noise generators. Models of those type of buccal resonators were used in rural areas of Mexico until the middle of last century, as my first whistle made of a metal cup of soda or beer. Also, the complex dynamics of the sonorous mechanism was published. The complex system of the chaos chamber couldn't be simulated with mathematical models and computers and in laboratories of fluid dynamics or aerodynamics. The simulation was made at home with a big model and talc injected with a foot pump used for inflatable rubber boats. It was estimated that in a real resonator the noisy sounds begin at less than 2 milliseconds, after the blowing of the air. Following video shows a slow visualization of a turbulent flow dynamics of air with talc injected inside chaos chamber and Helmholtz resonator. Turbulent dynamics of air generates noise. In 2002, I published the internal structure of my first experimental models of death resonators, which were analyzed with scientific techniques. The sonorous mechanism of death resonator was described and the functioning of its main elements was explained. In 2007, one way for its construction was published. After that publication, copies were commercialized by several merchants, mainly in Mexico and the US. But many of them are not of good quality and acoustic power. The original source was not mentioned by some plagiarists and ancient wind whistles and their sounds were not analyzed and shown. Several invented uses were published in papers and videos, as their ancient use in wars, but without providing evidence of it. Many experimental models were constructed and their noisy sounds were analyzed. The experimental models and their sounds can say more than the available writings of the ancient resonators. The complex frequencies of the noisy sounds can be shown with spectrograms. That type of sounds cannot be well described with words and musical writings. It is better to listen them. When 2 or more models are played at the same time can produce very special effects, but they need to be listened and lived to perceive them well with the ears and inside the head. In 2006, archaeologist Agi both published in a PhD thesis photos and the first computed tomographies, CT, of some aerophones of noise from the Ethnological Museum of Berlin. Other authors, as Susan Rawcliffe, Vanessa Rodens, and Gonzalo Sanchez Santiago, published their studies in several papers, including 2 doctoral theses on other ancient noise generators recovered from Veracruz and Oaxaca states, and from the Mayan zone, but now I don't have time to comment them. They use different designations. For example, Rawcliffe called them chamber duct flutes, but they are not conventional flutes and they were not included in any classification system of musical or acoustic instruments. In 2006, I could analyze the first fragment of a wind resonator that was found on the surface of an archaeological site, located at the top of a hill called Mazatepetl, Cerro del Venado or Judeo, south on Mexico City, by archaeologist Francisco Rivas Castro. The results of the study were presented in several national and international academic forums that were interested on them. The fragment is important because it shows the internal structure of the sonorous chambers, without the need of an X-ray or a CT, because its decorating face was broken. Its sonorous system is in operating conditions to generate sounds, but they are not the same that when had the decorating face, to form the exit chamber. That fragment was found on the surface at the southwest of the main structure A of the archaeological site, but it was not contextualized. It is estimated that came from the early Aztec or Mexica period, considering the ceramic pieces that were recovered from the surface in same area. It was the first death resonator that was analyzed and characterized with acoustic techniques. His sound pressure was 102 decibels, measured with a sonimeter at 1 metros and 0 degrees or an acoustic radiated power of 0.2 watts. Also, his noisy sounds were analyzed with spectral techniques. Its power is not very high, but it can be listened at a considerable distance, because his main frequencies are generated in the range of maximum hearing sensitivity of humans, between 1 and 6 kHz, as it is shown in the spectrogram of the sounds. Its noisy sounds are the first that were recorded of an ancient death resonator, and they can be recreated and listened. In 2015, a cremated wind death resonator was analyzed. It was found in Tlatelolco, Guerrero State, but the information of the exploration was not found. The resonator was found in a sack with cremated bones and obsidian blades, by archaeologist Jorge Cervantes Martinez. He allowed me to analyze directly and to characterize the first complete resonator of this type. I don't know the exact location of the finding at the archaeological site, but they told me that it was found in the main structure. It shows the style of the resonators that were found in the Valley of Mexico. The sack where the resonator was found had cremated bones of 2 skeletons that were already identified as those of the figure. The photo shows the green obsidian blades. It seems that they came from Navaja's site, located at Hidalgo State. The hearing distance of the noisy sound was measured in spore fields of National Polytechnic Institute, Mexico City. The red line has a distance of 250 steps, about 3 soccer fields or a baseball field. It means the resonator sounds could and can be well listened inside any ancient ceremonial space. The internal structure and morphology of the resonator is shown in the X-ray and the drawing of the sonorous mechanism. The sound pressure was between 90 and 106 decibels and a radiated acoustic power of 0.0125 to 0.5 watts. The generated frequencies are shown in the spectrogram and a short track of its sounds can be listened. It is my first generation and recording of ancient sounds of this type. The exact ancient use of wind resonators was lost, but they can be reused. For example, Bertha Sandoval uses some of my models in shows of the CATRINA of Guadalupe Posadas, during the Mexican Day of the Dead. Nora Elsa Ascencio Valdez used several recordings of my experimental models of several wind resonators in her MS thesis of an electroacoustic composition 4 elements, a natural pre-Columbian experience. Music Technology Group. University of York. England. 2006. The 4 elements of nature are air, water, fire, and earth. Following sounds are from track 1 Air and a Frog of Clay. Enrico Chapla created trio cadenza or encrypted poetry inspired in The Raven of Edgar Allan Poe, for Three Whistles Skull. He used some of my models. His composition was played by the Orchestra of Cincinnati University in 2009. Flutist Abraham Elias played that composition in Tianjin, China, 2010. Cristina Garcia Iles used some of my models of death whistles in her doctoral work of musical composition, at University of Montreal, Canada. It is the first doctoral thesis with models of that kind or of other Mexican resonators. Other experimental models are shown in the photo and the noisy sounds of some of them that were recorded for an interview for Associated Press in 2008, and they can be listened. Models can also be reused in conferences and presentations. Many noisy sounds were generated in a conference for the exhibition of music and art at the Museo del Palacio de Bellas Artes of Mexico City, this year. At the back is shown a segment of the beautiful mural the creator of Diego Rivera, The sounds were well listened in the big open space of the museums, from first to second floor. This presentation may be used for personal and educative aims if its source is cited. For commercial uses, written permission of his authors is required. Thank you.